Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to our 30th meeting of RJMEC. It is our fourth meeting in 24 months of extended transition period. We are now only 17 months to elections scheduled for December 2024. To date, critical milestones as set out in the revitalized peace agreement have not been accomplished in accordance with the timelines of the roadmap. In my recent engagements, both within the region and at the international level, it is clear that there is growing concern regarding the slow pace of implementation of the agreement in view of the timeline set in the roadmap. There is therefore need for concerted efforts to fast-track its implementation. My statement this morning will highlight the recent RJMEC engagements with the parties, other South Sudanese stakeholders, regional leaders, and the international community. I will then provide updates on the progress made since our last meeting and conclude with observations and recommendations. Since our last meeting, I had the opportunity to meet His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit, President of the Republic of South Sudan, where I briefed him on RJMEC's assessment of the status of the implementation of the agreement, as well as concerns over the slow pace of implementation of critical tasks required for the conduct of credible elections by the end of the transition period, namely the redeployment of the necessary unified forces, reconstitution of the National Constitutional Review Commission, and preparation for the conduct of elections. His Excellency the President acknowledged RJMEC's concerns, recounted the RTNew's ongoing efforts to expedite implementation, and assured RJMEC of his government's commitment to complete implementation of the critical pending tasks and to hold elections as scheduled. I also met with His Excellency Dr. Riek Machar Tene, Vice President of the Republic of South Sudan, and discussed with him a wide range of issues about the implementation of the RACRIS, including the delay by the RTNew to complete critical tasks as per the roadmap. His Excellency the Vice President reiterated his commitment to implementation of the RACRIS to the letter and spirit in order to have credible elections. RJMEC attended the 14th ordinary session of IGAD Assembly of Heads of State and Government, which was held in Djibouti on the 12th of June 2023, which among others deliberated on the crisis in neighboring Sudan and the peace process in South Sudan. Regarding the South Sudan peace process in particular, the summit in its communique, among others, took note of the RTNew's commitment to hold elections in December 2024 and urged the government to expedite implementation of key tasks critical for the conduct of elections. On 20th June 2023, I briefed the United Nations Security Council session in New York on the RJMEC's assessment of the status of the implementation of the RACRIS and our role in support of the peace implementation. In the briefing, I appealed for international support to the peace process, including direct funding for some of the critical upcoming processes of the permanent constitution-making election preparations and the disarmament, mobilization, and reintegration DDR programs. The Security Council members urged the parties in South Sudan to work collectively to honor their commitments in the RACRIS and expressed their backing for strengthening 35% quota of women as outlined in the RACRIS. However, they voiced concerns over the slow progress in implementing the RACRIS and failure to meet the agreed targets. I also held separate meetings with the permanent representatives of the IGAD member states, the AU C5, and the UN Security Council A3. I briefed them on the implementation of the RACRIS and appealed for support to the South Sudan peace process. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the status of the implementation of the agreement, I will now highlight key observations under each chapter of the agreement. In terms of the status of the implementation of the agreement, under governance, the Judicial Reforms Committee, JRC, has so far held stakeholders consultations in Western Bargasel, Western Equatoria, and Upper Nile states, as well as the Greater Bipor administrative area. Perspectives from these stakeholders will be critical in informing the JRC's recommendations to the RTGNU on the judicial reforms. In terms of legislative reforms, on the 5th of June 2023, the National Election Act Amendment Bill 2023 and the Anti-Corruption Commission Act Amendment Bill 2023 were tabled before the reconstituted Transitional National Legislature for consideration and enactment. I encourage the TNL to expedite this process and enact these laws. Regarding the National Constitution Amendment Committee, NCSC, the RTGNU has extended its mandate for another 4 months to enable the committee to complete its pending tasks, namely to draft and complete amendments to the NGO, the investment promotion, the mining, the transport, the pension fund, and the Telecommunications Acts. The delayed reconstitution of the Political Parties Council and other independent institutions and commissions at the national level continues to impede progress on the implementation of this chapter of the agreement. On the permanent ceasefire and transition security arrangements, the permanent ceasefire is still holding, which is a commendable achievement under Chapter 2. This notwithstanding, Citizen VM reported alleged clashes between SPLO-IO forces and some defectors in Mayut County of Upper Nile State. In Central Equatorial State, Citizen VM reported increased National Salvation Army NAS attacks on both civilians and the SSPDF. There are also clashes allegedly between the SPLM-IO Protection Force from Panyikang County, Upper Nile State, and an SSPDF protection unit from Ruweng administrative area, which led to injury and loss of life. I would like to hear more from the JDB and System VM regarding these alleged clashes. On the unification of forces, there is no new progress to report regarding the redeployment of Phase 1 necessary unified forces, nor the commencement of Phase 2 NUF training. I would like to hear an update from the RTGNU and the JDB on these pending tasks. Regarding Citizen VM's operational and administrative challenges, as reported in the last plenary, I have held several consultations with the concerned parties, the Citizen VM leadership and the Executive Secretary of the IGAD to resolve the issues raised. Consequently, IGAD has reviewed and endorsed the terms of reference of the Citizen VM chairperson and the Citizen VM board. In addition, it has given guidance on the draft terms of reference of the Citizen VM Technical Committee, CTC. Citizen VM leadership is therefore expected to brief the board on these outcomes and to present the draft CTC terms of reference for endorsement. I would like to commend the SSPDF leadership efforts in inculcating discipline and holding the forces accountable, as evidenced by its recent general court-martials, which tried the 2 cases in Niei, Central Equatorial State. The accused soldiers and junior officers faced offenses ranging from murder to sexual and gender-based violence. Sentences handed down included imprisonment, dismissal, reduction in rank, fines, and compensation to the victims. It is encouraging that all other forces institutionalize accountability measures and take steps to prevent recurrence of such crimes, especially gender-based violence, and for rehabilitation of victims. On police reforms, efforts are being made to reform the National Police Service as outlined in the National Police Strategic Plan 2020-2024. In this regard, RJMEC welcomes the ongoing focus on preventing and investigating sexual and gender-based violence, including by strengthening the police capabilities in identifying and investigating gender-based violence cases. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of humanitarian affairs, the onset of rains and the influx of refugees and returnees from Sudan continue to exacerbate the already severe humanitarian needs in the country. However, it is concerning that there is growing population of returnees who are stranded in rank, Upper Nile State, where conditions are deteriorating. I appeal to RTGNU and the international community to mobilize additional support for the resettlement of the returnees. On resource, economic, and finance management, it is noted that there is progress in the budget process. However, there is need for RTGNU to fulfill its budgetary commitments of funding agreement institutions which have continued to face recurrent financial challenges. In this regard, the RTGNU is urged to create fiscal space needed to implement the RRCs. Further, the RTGNU is urged to ensure the establishment of effective public procurement and payroll systems and grant public service concessions, public borrowing and debt management to facilitate transparency and accountability in the public sector as per Article 4.12.1 of the RRCs. The importance of the private sector as an engine of economic growth cannot be overemphasized, especially in transition economies. It is therefore recommended that the establishment of the Enterprise Development Funds be prioritized in order to improve productivity and to provide the domestic private sector's access to finance. In this regard, it is concerning that the legal framework for the Youth Enterprise Development Fund and the Women Enterprise Development Fund remains outstanding. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on transition justice, the drafting of the Commission of Truth, Reconciliation and Healing and the Compensation and Reparation Authority bills are in progress. It is understood that the two bills have been substantially reviewed based on expert views arising from the recent Transition Justice Conference and public consultations. I urge the RTGNU to expedite completion of the two bills. Regarding the making of the permanent constitution, there is no further progress to report. The National Constitution Review Commission, NCRC, is yet to be reconstituted, and the other mechanisms like Constitution Drafting Committee, CDC, and the Preparatory Subcommittee, PSC, for the National Constitution Conference have not yet been established as required by the Constitution Making Process Act. However, I am informed that the stakeholders have all submitted their lists of nominated representatives to reconstitute the National Constitution Review Commission and establish the Preparatory Subcommittee. The parties have agreed on the allocation of membership within the NCRC and PSC. I urge the parties to submit the list of their nominees in order to hasten the reconstitution of the NCRC and the establishment of the PSC. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, overall it is important to reiterate that in order to conduct free, fair, and credible elections as scheduled, there is need to achieve the following benchmarks in the RRCs. A, reconstitution and operationalization of the institutions tasked with the preparation and conduct of elections, namely the Political Parties Council and the National Elections Commission. B, judicial reforms to enhance the capacity and independence of the judicial institutions to deal with election-related disputes. C, completion of the unification and redeployment of forces in order to provide security throughout the election process. D, the making of the permanent constitution under whose provisions elections shall be conducted. And E, improvement to the overall political and civic space to enhance public participation in the constitution-making and electoral process. In view of the aforementioned, it is important to underscore the need to deliberately hasten the pace of implementation of the agreement. I would like, therefore, to make the following recommendations to RTGNU. A, provide adequate and predictable funding for the implementation of the all critical pending tasks of the agreement. B, continue to consult and dialogue in the spirit of collegial cooperation and consensus to address emerging issues during the implementation of the agreement. C, prioritize efforts aimed at promoting peace, reconciliation, and healing at national and community level. D, prioritize the implementation of social service professions as outlined in the Budget Appropriation Bill of 2023-2024 in order to reduce economic vulnerability of ordinary citizens, and E, provide immediate support to returnees to enable them resettle and reintegrate in their communities or places of choice in safety and dignity. In conclusion, Your Excellencies, as South Sudan marks its 12th independence anniversary, I would like to congratulate the people and government of South Sudan on this milestone, and more importantly, on sustaining the peace efforts over the last 5 years since the signing of the revitalized peace agreement in 2018. South Sudan should seize this opportunity to consolidate the peace dividends and implement the critical tasks in the roadmap so as to fulfill the aspirations of our people for justice, equality, respect for human rights, and the rule of law. I thank you. Thank you. We proceed to the next agenda item. Listen to the reports from the RJMEC.